Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and I am back with another Simon Says Stamp STAMPtember exclusive set. This is only available during STAMPtember. I'll have the info on my blog post, which will be linked directly below the video. So this set is the Concord 9th exclusive, a collaboration with Simon, and it is the cutest little set ever. I can't even with it. I think it's just the cutest little thing. So this is Monster Hugs, and I started with some Strathmore ready cut watercolor paper and put it in my travel platform, and I only did that because I'm using the watercolor paper and it has a bit of a texture, so I knew I would have to kind of double stamp some of these images. Otherwise I would have just used my acrylic blocks because everything was really easy to line up with this set. Because the great thing about this set is you have your little monster, and then you have options. He has a little fist or a little waving hand, and then you can have him holding a little sign, or you can have him holding a balloon, and it's so cute. I love it. So I stamped the monster, did my go-to VersaFine ONYX black clear heat embossing. After he was stamped, I chose the little fist image, lined that up. I'm going to do the same thing, stamp it, heat emboss it, etc. Again, if I was just stamping this on like Nina Classic Crest cardstock or just a smoother cardstock, I would just use the acrylic blocks because I could stamp pretty much all these images that I'm stamping all at once, then heat emboss it if I wanted to or whatever. But I just didn't want to risk stamping it and then missing parts because of the texture of the paper. So I just do this all in little parts. So I'd stamped his little fist there, and then I have the balloon string, and both the balloon string and the actual handle for the sign, there's a gap on both these stamps so that it lines up perfectly, so it looks like he's holding it. I don't know, maybe I'm the weird one. That made me giddy. It was like, this is so perfect. It's coming together so easily, and I don't have to do anything. So I stamped that, heat embossed it, and then I stamped the balloon. And the funny thing is originally this was going to be a birthday card. Like in my head, I was thinking like he's going to be holding this great big balloon. It's going to say happy birthday. That's really, really cute. So I stamped the balloon, heat embossed it. I didn't even realize there was this happy Halloween sentiment in the set till I went to pull out the birthday one. And then I was like, oh, what's this? There's, Halloween. Well, of course I had to change gears, turn it into a Halloween card. So I was like, I can still do this. It can be a Halloween balloon. Why not? So that's what I did. So I heat embossed the balloon, and then I'm going to use the happy Halloween sentiment, of course, because of course it's so cute. I'm just gonna keep raving about this set. I really love it. I think it's so adorable. I'm sad that it's part of the STAMPtember release. I wish it was part of like a regular release because I just think this is just adorable. I hope Concord 9th does similar sets like this. Like they have that bear one that's really, really cute too. When they do critter sets, they just, I don't know, I like all of Concord 9th stuff. It's another one of the brands that I collect. Anywho, okay, back to the card. After everything was heat embossed, I die cut that watercolor paper with the largest of Simon's WONKY rectangle dies. I die cut it first because I wanted to use basically the stitching as a guide. I'm taping this down to a hardboard here with painter's tape. And I'm just kind of eyeballing where the stitching is and creating just kind of a border around all of this, making sure to press it down really well. Because I'm going to do some watercoloring. And I want where all the stitching is to be clear of watercolor. So I've taped all that off. And now I'm using the Altenew watercolors that I just showed in my last haul video. I just got my hands on them. Side note, everyone was telling me, I had so many people telling me, they're like, oh, the empty palette case that Altenew released works better than the case these originally came in because the lid doesn't open properly. Yeah, they send those out with the watercolors right now, and I think until they go through all the stock. I had got that in my order, the empty palette case from Altenew, but my order from Simon, but I didn't include it in the haul because I thought it was a mistake, so I was going to contact Simon and be like, hey, this was accidentally included in my order, etc. And then I found out they were being sent, the empty palettes were being sent with the full ones, so you could switch them over, and that's what I did. Way better. I have no complaints about the palette now. It opens, no problem. It's great. So anyway, my thoughts on these actual watercolors. This is literally my first time using them. I haven't swatched them yet. Nothing. I haven't had time. But the one thing I'll say, they are creamy. I was aware. I knew that before I even ordered them. I would probably compare these in similarity to the Gonzai Tombi watercolors. So if you have used those, if you have those, these are similar. Just in the feel of them. One really cool thing about these is they do not dry back, which if you're not familiar with watercolor, when you apply watercolor wet, it'll look a lot more vibrant, but as it dries back and becomes a lot lighter, which is just something you kind of get used to with watercolor. With these, they purposely formulated them to not do that. So pretty much the color it goes down as, it stays, which is really cool. I'm actually really happy with that. So they're really easy to use. I like the colors, the few that I used. I used a purple and a couple oranges and a couple greens, and then I use a gray and a black, and I like them. I'm going to use them more. You guys will see more videos from me with them. I'm liking them. So I kept my watercoloring really simple. You know, I did a simple little purple background. I painted the blue and orange. I painted my little monster with the green, and then I added a little bit of gray and a little bit of black for the ground. And then I just took a bit more of that black and like painted the rest of the monster with that. Like simple, very, very just simple. And then once I make sure everything is completely dry, which these didn't take long to dry, but that's kind of irrelevant when it comes to watercoloring. Like, it just kind of depends on how much water you use and the paper you use and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, I wanted to make sure it was dry though before I do this next element. And this is where I'm going to create a couple masks to cover the balloon and the monster. Very simple masks, nothing too fancy. I just need those just to kind of protect them for like a second. So I'm just stamping the balloon and the monster onto Post-it notes. And this is Ink on 3's fade out ink. It doesn't really matter what ink you use. I just didn't want to use my VersaFine because I always find if I stamp VersaFine onto any sort of Post-it note type material, it doesn't dry or doesn't dry fast enough. And then I smear it, I get it on my hands, and then I transfer that onto my project. So that's the only reason why I picked a different ink. So I quickly cut out my balloon mask, my monster mask, same thing. I quickly cut it out. I didn't, go around every little, all his little pointy ends for his fur and whatnot. I just cut it because I just need to cover him because I don't want to cover these in splatter. So I'd also stamp the little hand of his. So just quickly stamp them, quickly cut them out, just, cutting on the line, but I'm not being too particular. And then I'm just going to use these to mask off the images because I want to do some splatter. I have had people asking what I use for black splatter. Black I don't use very often, but when I do, I highly recommend Distress Paint. Black Soot Distress Paint. Best splatter ever. You don't even have to add water to it. It's already a very thin, it's very liquidy. I love it. I have this one bottle. I'll link to the one though with the flip top, so you just squeeze it out. This is the one with like the dauber top, which I never use. I just pick up a bit with my paintbrush, put it onto an acrylic block, and splatter away. And you get perfect black splatter. The one thing you need to remember though is that this is permanent when it dries. I actually did not know that until I was watching a recent video of Tim Holtz, and he was going on about the using the Black Soot Distress Paint to mark something, and he's like, yeah, because once it's dry, it's permanent. And I was like, oh. I haven't had a problem with it though, because I immediately clean off my brushes when I use paint, regardless. You got to clean your brushes, take care of your stuff, and things like my acrylic blocks, I wipe them down while the paint is still wet. I don't leave it sitting out. My hardboard, I'm not worried about paint splatters on it, but just be aware that it is permanent. So if you get it where you don't want it, clean it up immediately, because yeah, it might be a little bit harder afterwards depending on the surface and whatnot. So that's how I use black splatter, and that's what I recommend though, because it's black, because other black paints, you can, if you want to try to water them down to thin them out, you're going to end up with like gray and not black. So I definitely recommend this, and I'll have it linked with the rest of my supplies. So I took my white Jelly Roll pen and added a few highlights, just a highlight to the balloon, a few little highlights to the monster, just to give it a little extra something, but nothing too crazy. And then I very carefully pulled my tape off of my project here. Again, make sure the watercolor, splatter, everything is dry. And then with this, I just very carefully pull the tape like basically back onto itself, so I don't tear my paper, because this time it's not like I'm cutting it down. Usually, I'm going to cut down my image, so I just rip the tape off. I don't really care. But because this is my finished piece, I want to make sure I don't tear. So if you pull the tape carefully and back on itself and make sure everything is dry, needs to be dry. If it is wet at all, you will tear your watercolor paper. So I peeled off the tape, and then for my card base, it's hard to show in the finished project on the video, but for the base, I cut down black cardstock, scored it at 5.5, so this will be a top folding A2 size card, and I'm going to line up my card base in my travel platform again, and I'm actually using the little L-shape creative corners from the MISTI set that I reach for a lot, because I want this card base just in case I end up needing to restamp it. And then it was kind of irrelevant using that because I ended up using more painter's tape to not only hold down my project because I didn't have anywhere to put the magnets, as you can see, but also to mask off the top portion of my card base. And I'm using Concord 9th plaid background stamp that I did some videos on last year. I think it was part of my Christmas series. I think it was my Christmas series that I used this stamp a few times. Really love this stamp. So I only inked up the edges basically with Simon's clear embossing ink, and then pulled my sleeve down over my hand. This helps if you're trying to stamp larger images with any stamp positioner. It lets your, the heel of your hand kind of glide over the lid. Makes it a little easier to stamp everything. So like I said, though, I only inked up the edges because no one's going to see the center. You're only going to see just the very edge and not even very much of it. But I love how clear embossing looks on black cardstock, and I thought it would just add a little extra something around the stamped and watercolored image. So I coated it all with Simon's clear embossing powder, and then I'm just going to melt all of this with my heat tool, and I don't know, there's something about clear glossy patterns on black that I'm like, yes. So yeah, just that nice gloss. Only a little bit of it shows around this panel because it's quite large, but it's enough. In real life, it's like, ooh, it just, it catches the light, and it's like, yes, I really like that. So I popped the main panel there on with Simon's Big Mama foam tape. And then for the inside of my card, you can do one of two things. I always get asked, like, what do you do when you have a dark cardstock card base? Like, how do you write to the recipient, etc.? Either you can use gel pens, which I have no problem using, or I will cut down or die cut lighter cardstock to put on the inside. So in this case, I just die cut some lighter weight white cardstock with that same wonky rectangle die. And then since I had it, I stamped the little monster, and this time the little waving hand stamp with Twisted Citron Distress Oxide ink. And then these 2 sentiments say, I like you. You're pretty, what does it say? You're pretty great. So yeah, I like you. You're pretty great. So stamp that, and then I'm going to adhere that to the inside of my card with my Xyron Mega Runner. And that's going to finish off this card. I thought I would keep it a little more simple. Simpler in my standards anyway. I didn't add any bling, bunch of rhinestones, etc. But I just thought I'd let the watercolor and the splatter and the cute little images speak for themselves. So that is it for today. I will have a link below the video to my blog post with info on STAMPtember and the stamp set, links to all the supplies used. You can check that out if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!